Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we are answering some frequently asked questions about Chinese food and Chinese cooking. If you have been watching some of my previous recipes, you may notice I have certain cooking habits or preferences, even the use of certain tools and utensils and things like that when it comes to Chinese food. And I think there are probably just some general questions that people tend to ask over and over again when they are new to cooking Chinese food. Perfectly fine, perfectly normal. I do find that it tends to be a greater mysteriousness when it comes to just Asian cooking as a whole, because there's ingredients that you don't recognize, there's condiments that you don't know what the heck they are, and then there are certain tools and cookware that tends to be very specific to Chinese cooking. So I'm going to answer some of those questions, and I'm even going to touch on some details that you may not recognize or just be very aware of, but it makes a big difference to the flavor of your Chinese food. So the first thing I want to talk about is the use of oil. So if you are used to cooking European food or Western food as a whole, olive oil is incredibly popular, and it's a great oil for certain things. But for Chinese food, you want to go with a more flavorless oil. So I recommend anything like sunflower, canola, or even peanut oil is very popular in China for Chinese food cooking. There tends to be nothing like butter or margarine, just because they did not exist in that form in traditional foods. However, we do cook with lard, and lard is great. I guess lard can be seen as the Chinese version, or just, you know, another version of, say, butter or margarine is kind of that semi-solid state. But we make lard all the time, just reducing it from fat, and it has a very particular beautiful flavor that you can't get with anything else. But it's probably also really bad for you. So canola oil, sunflower, or peanut will be the preferred one for everyday Chinese food cooking, just because olive oil has a very particular olivey taste, and it will change the flavor of whatever that you're making. So that's the first thing to switch out, or just get a little jug that you can keep, so whenever you're making Asian food, use that one instead. Second thing is black pepper versus white pepper. This is something that I think many people don't think about off the top of their head, but in a lot of Chinese cooking, when they say salt and pepper, they actually mean white pepper and not black peppercorns. I keep both in the kitchen because I do a variety of cooking. However, I find that white pepper has less of a bite, and most of the time when I am cooking Chinese food, white pepper is what is preferred, and it's also what I use. Certain regions may also use black pepper. There's a lot of regional variety when it comes to Chinese food. You know, you can't just lump it all under one single bubble, right? There are a lot of subcategories and regional specialties. So some places may also use black pepper, but I think the majority of what you will encounter when they say salt and pepper, it is white peppercorns instead of black. But is it a huge deal? Not end of the world difference. Just that if you do have access to both, I recommend that you getting both to use. Alright, next thing is about knives. Knives are very important because you use them all the time. If you are trained in traditional Chinese cooking in culinary school, this will be your knife of choice. This is a cleaver. It is dangerous, it is heavy, it is very interesting. This is pretty much like one continuous forged solid piece of metal, and it takes a lot of arm strength if you're used to using a smaller knife to get used to this one. But this is what most Chinese cooks would use, or even just common people in China, home cooks, they would mostly use something like this. But of course, this is a little ridiculous. You can use this if you get comfortable with it. I use it sometimes, but I personally prefer something smaller. It's a very similar shape. They're not exactly the same, of course. This one's much sturdier and can do much more. But this, for everyday, is perfectly fine. This is, you know, a little bit more flexible. It's more lightweight, it's smaller, and just easier to handle for someone like me. So unless you are like chopping ribs or something, you don't necessarily need a cleaver, to be honest. And if you're not comfortable with something of this size, You don't have to use something like this. Although I will say, and if I can find it, I'll link you to a super cool video of a master chef who pretty much shreds, or not shreds, shall we say cuts tofu into like string-like threads using a cleaver. Like that is the level of mastery that you can get to in traditional Chinese food using a cleaver. This is essentially the one tool, you know, conquers all the food, that type of thing when it comes to Chinese food, but you don't have to have one. Perfectly fine if you use something else, and even perfectly fine if you use something like this. I do prefer something a little bit more sturdy, so I can do a lot of smashing. I smash a lot of things in cooking, like garlic, that you have noticed maybe. So that's a little chat about knives. Then let's go on to talking about cookware, especially woks. So here's the deal with woks. Do you need a wok? It depends. If you have a electric stove, you know, the one with the coils, a traditional wok will not fit because a traditional wok has a rounded bottom. Most kitchens in China, or at least traditional ones anyways, use gas. So they have a round bottom, and the round bottom nestles really deep in there, and when you turn on the heat, you get a lot of heat, heating things up very quickly, very evenly. It's great. But over here you have a lot of electric stoves, and you can't put that round bottom on a flat stove. Although there are little rings you can add now that nestles, like kind of like a little ring that nestles your round bottom wok onto the ring, and the ring sits over your electric stove. Yeah, I think that's ridiculous because that minimizes the amount of heat that you can get, and you might as well just get a flat bottom. Flat bottom woks do exist out there. However, personally, I cook most of my Chinese food out of one of these non-stick pans. All right, it's not a wok, it's a pan. If you are very particular, you can get a wok, no big deal. If you are very particular about that almost smoky flavor that comes from stir fries, then you need a wok. That is just the method of cooking, and just that the almost like smoky richness of a flash cooked stir fry, pretty much I've only been able to do in a wok. I do also have a wok, but this is perfectly fine most of the time. I keep one that is deeper for stir fries, and you'll notice that I use another pan that is more shallow for things like sauteing or pan frying. So I think just one of each will do just fine if you already have something like that in the house. Once you get, I suppose, more comfortable with your Chinese cooking, you may wish to go up to a wok, but I don't think that is the end all be all of what you must have when you first start out experimenting and trying out Chinese food. And here's a little backstory too. I find that the kind of particularness towards woks and stir fries and, you know, things like that is really because Cantonese food is much more recognized out in the West, or just anywhere outside of China, versus other regional specialties. So like I mentioned, China is a very big place. There's a lot of regional cuisines with very different cooking methods, flavors, and even ingredients, and even, you know, utensils and cookware, right? But in the South, so I'm talking from Hong Kong or from Canton or Guangzhou, which is where I am from, there's a lot of stir frying, flash cooking that happens in a wok. So because that southern Chinese food, that region is very popular, and if you go to Chinese restaurants just out here, a lot of them do cater to that palate. So I think people are more familiar with the idea of woks and stir fries versus other methods of Chinese cooking, which are still great and which may not even require a wok. So there you go. I hope that you learned something in today's Q&A. I hope that you found this really helpful as well, just to your general knowledge. Again, if you have questions and comments, hit me up over on social media. Check out the blog, check out some recipes, and leave me something down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you really enjoyed it, so I know to make more of them. And until next time, take great care of yourselves, eat well, and I will see you soon. Bye!